You're listening to POV, the Portland Ovations podcast. I'm Galen Koch. It's been a difficult year for artists, performers, and makers in Maine. Even that word, difficult, seems insufficient to describe the effects of the pandemic on Maine's creative community. The coronavirus forced venues to shut down and made our beloved gatherings unsafe. For Portland Ovations, the disappearance of in-person, live events struck at the heart of the organization's mission for community well-being. Like many businesses and organizations this year, Ovations continues to pivot and is now refocusing funding to support Maine artists and the creation of new and original work. Ovations' new commissioning project supports 5 performing artists living and creating in Maine, and also includes a partnership with the Abbey Museum to create a performance of Wabanaki stories for young audiences in school and family settings. Over the course of this season and into next, audiences are invited into the creative process of 5 Maine artists. Through virtual conversations and seeing works in progress, audiences gain up-close, behind-the-scenes, candid insight into the real work of creating new performance. By commissioning the creation of these performing arts experiences and sharing those works through its in-person and virtual communities, Portland Ovations not only brings the world to Maine, but brings Maine artists to the world. In this episode, we meet one of Ovations' 5 commissioned artists, Samuel James. Samuel James is many things.
I am a tall guy. That's usually how I introduce myself. You have to say you're tall now. People used to be able to just tell because they'd be in the room with me.
He's also a writer, a storyteller, a filmmaker, an educator, and a musician. Samuel James is a staff writer for Black Girl in Maine and Mainer News, a regular contributor and live storyteller on The Moth, and a touring musician. This year, Portland Ovations is supporting Samuel in the recording of a series of songs called the Already Home Recordings, and in the creation of a new education series for Maine students. I sat down, virtually, with Samuel to hear about his inspiration for the new recordings and educational program, and to talk about his experience as an artist living through a pandemic.
I was supposed to be telling a story on stage in London on April 1st. And it had been 2 years since I'd been to England, so I was really looking forward to it, and I was starting to email people, and I was like, hey, maybe I could bring my guitar and hop on a stage someplace and make this a double. And then, obviously it all came apart, and London was the first one to drop, and then you slowly watch this trickle, and then it's a landslide, or a flood, and then all of a sudden you don't have anywhere to go. And you're just sort of stuck at home. So as a musician, my year is booked out in advance, pretty much an entire year, sometimes a year and a half. And it's a really weird thing to suddenly have no career. To have nothing planned out is very strange. I've been writing more, and performing has taken a back seat. I've done some live streaming shows, but the very last thing I thought that would be in demand would be a recording, because recordings mostly are not every musician thinks of them this way. I do. There's a famous jazz saxophonist that I got this idea from, or made me think of it this way. But I think of albums as business cards or postcards, or as a trailer for the show. Right, they're an ad for the show. So if you like this album, come see me live. And because I think of albums that way, it was on the last page of anything I thought was going to happen. And then Portland Ovations shows up and makes this offer and allows me to start recording again. And I cannot tell you the weight off my shoulders that I did not know I was carrying when somebody wants you to record in a time when you can't even go on a stage. It's such an incredible and beautiful privilege. I'm so thrilled with it. And the premise behind the Already Home recordings was what I'm doing now, what they're helping me to continue to do, which is I'm taking these songs, these traditional American folk songs, and I'm sort of reversing the influence of them, which is to say that there are a number of traditional American folk songs that are sort of claimed by black folk musicians and also claimed by white folk musicians. And I'm attempting to record them as somebody who is from a black folk tradition as well as a white folk tradition via my own heritage. I'm going to record them all 3 songs, each solo, as people have seen me perform, one person, one instrument, but also as a band, me being all of the instruments. And I'm going to reverse their sound, how we're sort of used to hearing them sound. So for an example, there's one called May the Circle Be Unbroken. And it's an old spiritual, and I think we're all used to hearing it a certain way. And I'm going to record it in a way that I feel is maybe more honest to its heritage. Maybe you've heard May the Circle Be Unbroken done on the banjo. Well, the banjo is an African instrument. So people think of the banjo as a specific kind of like white instrument, like a rural, poor white instrument. And something I hope to do with this project, to continue to do with this project, is point out that that the banjo came from Africa, and now it is a specific symbol of a really specific kind of white supremacy, and that something happened along the way from Africa to white supremacy. And it's something I hope to point to with this album. I grew up in the state, all over the state, because I spent a part of my childhood in foster homes. So home became this very personal thing, right? It's something that I take with me. It's home's where you hang your hat, and home is where the heart is. There's a million cliches about it, but home to me is something that I think of it as a lot of people think of their physical homes, but I think of it more as an emotional state, meaning that like it's something I take with me. It's something personally. It's something that I have all of my favorite things in. And it's something that if I love you and trust you and want you around, I welcome you into it. And I think as a musician, that's something that you can, or as an artist in general, I think that's an aim. You're trying to create a space for everybody to come into. In a very general idea, that's the point of the project, but it's also the idea of as a musician, I'm moving a lot, right? Like in a lot of ways, my childhood in foster home sort of prepared me to live on the road as a musician, and I don't get homesick and I don't miss places, I think, in the same way that a lot of my peers do. You get to bring home with you and you get to put it on stage. And if people come to the show, they get to come into your home. And they get to dance around, they get to laugh at some jokes and hear some stories, and do everything that you want to do at your home, if you do it right. So I'm putting together right now a program for Portland Ovations that is an educational video about the heritage of this music for like ages K through 5. And the video will be about a half hour long, and it's a story about a little boy who doesn't like being small. So he goes to his grandfather, who's really big, and his grandfather explains to him about music and his musical heritage. I think it's very important to teach this kind of history, everywhere, but especially a place like Maine, because Maine's the whitest state, and it's the whitest state deliberately. There have been many things that have happened in the state's history to keep it white. And I think it's been time for a long time that we work against that. There is a beautiful history of this country that another part of this country tries to erase all the time. But we benefit from having the history. We benefit from knowing about each other and knowing about ourselves. And there's a part of us that feels very offended, feels we don't have to know this. We shouldn't have to know it. And it's our choice It's our freedom to choose not to know things, and I think that's an upside down version of freedom. I think you are more free the more you know, and we're more free with each other the more we know about each other. I can tell you that my entire life I have been told by people who were racist that they were not being racist, and that it was up to me to follow them in that decision. That is a terrible thing to feel, that you question your own existence, and you question everybody else's view of you, and you question your own right to decide how you are perceived. That is up to you, and it's not up to other people, no matter what they do, to convince you. And I think that's a battle everybody feels. Everybody feels that battle which is why Tiny Bill McGraw in this is upset that he's small. Right? There's something outside in the world telling him that he should be upset that he's small. And that's the small thing is a specific thing because it's something that all children are. All children grow through. Every kid's trying to reach up to that higher level. They're trying to get onto that cookie shelf, and they can't reach it. And that has nothing to do with them. That is how the world has been structured around them. And I think tying not necessarily the idea of race, but the idea of the outside world making a judgment of you or deciding your movements. I think that's something that children can relate to. I still remember being small, even though, as I said earlier, I'm a tall guy. It's Black history, but it's American history. It's not exclusive. It's not like Black kids are going to watch this and learn, and white kids will be blind to it, right? That's not what it is. It's designed in a specific way to benefit as many ears and eyes as possible. Music is a specific thing that I started off as a busker, so I play in the streets, and the first thing I noticed is that up to a certain age, every single child who hears it starts dancing right away. Every single child, to the point where I've been asked to stop playing so families could move on without tearing their child away and making them cry. And that's not specific to my music, right? That's not necessarily about the vehicle of me. The heritage of this music is dance music. And you can see why. You can see why when you play it. You can see children's reaction. And there's a gateway there. There's a gateway to the soul, to something, right? And I think you can look through American history, American music, like I said earlier with the banjo, right? There is a history in this country of music being a path, a gateway. And sometimes that gateway gets co-opted, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's a real path forward.
Thank you for listening to POV from Portland Ovations. This episode was produced by me, Galen Koch, with special thanks to Samuel James. Stay tuned for more episodes from Maine-based performing artists in Ovations Commissioning Project. Playwright and sexual trafficking survivor advocate Dee Clark, dance maker Riley Watts, and artistic collaborators, writer Kerem Durdag and musician Andy Happel. The new works created over the first 6 months of 2021 will be seen in work-in-progress presentations in May and June, and then presented live as part of Ovations 2021 to 2022 and 2022 to 2023 seasons. Premieres will include stage readings, storytelling presentations, concerts, and immersive experiences. And of course, you can tune in and hear about these projects here on POV. Ovations POV is produced in part with generous support from a major project grant from the Maine Humanities Council, which receives funding from the National Endowment for the Humanities.